The sharp clang of a bell echoed through the cavernous Whitmore estate, followed by frantic footsteps. Leo Carter stumbled back, his breathing ragged, as his gaze darted between the ornate golden mirror on the wall and the handwritten letter in his trembling hands. The mansion's dim lighting cast eerie shadows, making the grandeur feel more like a gilded prison. What is this?" Leo muttered, his voice barely audible. The letter, its ink smudged as if written in haste, had shattered his world. His eyes locked on the name scrawled at the bottom, Agatha Whitmore. Behind him, the sound of heels clicking against the marble floor grew louder. Agatha's poised silhouette emerged from the shadows, her piercing blue eyes gleaming with a mix of satisfaction and cold indifference. "Ah, I see you found the letter," she said, her voice calm, almost too calm. "Now you finally understand. Before we dive deeper into this mystery, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and let us know where you're watching from. Are you a cozy living room or maybe somewhere with a little bit more mystery in the air? Let's see who's tuning in from all around the world. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an update. If you're enjoying the story so far, give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to share it with your friends. They won't want to miss this. And of course, turn on that notification bell so you're the first to know when the next part drops. Let's keep the mystery going. The rain fell in relentless sheets as Leo Carter trudged along the narrow, poorly lit streets of Austin, Texas. His threadbare jacket did little to shield him from the downpour, and his worn sneakers squelched with every step. At 23, life had already weighed him down in ways that felt insurmountable. The death of his father a year ago had left Leo saddled with crushing debts, medical bills, unpaid loans, and the cost of keeping his own dream of finishing law school alive. His part-time job at a local diner barely covered the rent for his shoebox apartment. Nights were sleepless, spent poring over textbooks or staring at the ceiling, haunted by questions of how much longer he could hold on. Every day felt like a losing battle against a mountain of obligations that only grew taller with time. Lost in his thoughts, Leo barely noticed his phone vibrating in his pocket. It wasn't until the third buzz that he snapped out of his daze and fumbled to answer. "This is Leo Carter," he said, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Mr. Carter," came a composed, authoritative voice on the other end. "This is Agatha Whitmore. I'd like to meet with you regarding your financial situation." Leo froze mid-step, his heart pounding. "I'm sorry, who are you? How do you know about—" "I know enough," she interrupted smoothly, her tone leaving no room for argument. "Meet me at Whitmore Bistro, 7 p.m. sharp. It's important." Before he could respond, the line went dead. He stared at his phone, the cryptic conversation replaying in his mind. Agatha Whitmore. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but he couldn't place it. Intrigued, wary, and desperate for answers, Leo turned and began making his way to the address. The Whitmore Bistro exuded an air of sophistication that immediately made Leo feel out of place. The soft hum of classical music played over the low murmur of patrons. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in a warm glow, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries filled the air. Leo's damp sneakers squeaked against the polished floor, drawing a few disapproving glances from well-dressed diners. In the far corner of the room, a striking woman with silver hair sat alone at a table. Her posture was perfect, her tailored navy suit radiating wealth and authority. Her piercing blue eyes met his as she raised a manicured hand, gesturing for him to sit. "You must be Mr. Carter," she said, her voice as composed as it had been over the phone. Leo hesitated, shifting uncomfortably under her gaze. "Yeah, that's me. Mrs. Whitmore?" "Agatha," she corrected, folding her hands on the table. "Please sit." He lowered himself into the chair, unsure of what to expect. "I don't mean to be rude, but why am I here? What's this about?" Agatha took a slow sip of her tea, her expression unreadable. "I know about your debts, Leo, the ones your father left behind. I know about your struggles to finish law school, and I know you're drowning." His stomach tightened. "How do you know all that?" "That's not important," she replied smoothly. "What matters is that I can help you." Leo leaned back, skepticism creeping into his voice. "Help me? Why?" Agatha's lips curved into a small, deliberate smile. "Because I need something from you in return." Her next words hit like a thunderclap. "Marry me." Leo blinked, sure he had misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Agatha said, her tone unwavering. "Marry me, and I'll pay off every last cent you owe. The Whitmore estate was even more imposing than Leo had imagined. The towering iron gates creaked open as he approached, revealing a sprawling mansion surrounded by meticulously manicured gardens. The driveway stretched like a path to another world, its cobblestones glistening under the late afternoon sun. Despite the grandeur, an eerie silence hung in the air, broken only by the crunch of gravel beneath his shoes. Inside, the mansion was a showcase of opulence. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting prisms of light across the marble floors. Antique furniture, ornate mirrors, and priceless artwork adorned every room. Yet, for all its beauty, the house felt cold, as if it had been frozen in time. Agatha led him through the grand foyer, her heels clicking against the floor with a precision that matched her calculated demeanor. "Your room is in the east wing," she said, barely glancing back at him. "You'll find everything you need there. Dinner is served promptly at 7. Leo nodded, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of his new reality. The contract they had signed earlier that day weighed heavily in his mind. It was a legally binding agreement. No romance, no physical obligations, just a month of companionship in exchange for the elimination of his debts. Simple on paper, yet far more complicated in practice. The staff, though polite, were tight-lipped and avoided his gaze. Their movements were almost mechanical, as if they were part of the mansion itself. Every door Leo tried seemed locked, and every hallway seemed designed to disorient. As he unpacked his modest belongings in the lavishly furnished guest room, an unsettling thought struck him. He might be free from his debts, but he was now a prisoner of Agatha's world. And the walls of his gilded cage were already closing in. The Whitmore estate was as vast as it was silent, and Leo quickly learned that the mansion's sprawling library was one of its most formidable features. Nestled at the far end of the house, behind a heavy oak door, it seemed almost like a secret sanctuary. Shelves of dusty leather-bound books lined the walls, reaching all the way up to the high ceiling. The faint scent of aged paper and wood permeated the air, mingling with the faint odor of old velvet from the worn armchairs in the corners. After dinner, Leo found himself wandering the halls, feeling a strange urge to explore. He passed the grand staircase, the gleaming chandeliers, and the numerous portraits of stern-looking Whitmore ancestors that seemed to judge his every step. His footsteps echoed eerily through the empty hallways. Eventually, his curiosity led him to the library. The door creaked open as he stepped inside, the low light casting long shadows across the rows of books. It was here that Leo spotted something unexpected, an old photograph, framed and tucked carefully between a pair of antique books on a dusty shelf. He pulled it out, surprised to find it was a black and white photo of a younger Agatha Whitmore, her features softer, less severe, standing beside a man who looked eerily familiar. Leo's heart skipped a beat. The man in the photo had the same dark eyes and strong jawline as his father. Confusion swirled in his mind as he stared at the picture. What was Agatha doing with his father? Why had she never mentioned him? Just as he was about to ask, he felt a cold chill brush his neck. Agatha appeared behind him, her voice low and steady. "You've found it, haven't you?" she said, her eyes hardening. "That's my late husband, and your father." A wave of realization hit Leo like a ton of bricks. His father had been involved with Agatha, deeply, painfully involved, and now Leo was entangled in a game far bigger than he had ever anticipated. Leo's hands trembled as he held the photograph, his father's familiar face staring back at him. The revelation gnawed at his mind like a relentless echo. "My father was married to you?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Agatha's expression was unreadable, her piercing blue eyes locked on his. "Not quite," she said, taking the photograph from his hand and placing it back on the shelf. "He was my first love. We were engaged, but he left me. No explanation, no goodbye. Just gone." Leo staggered back, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He tried to reconcile the image of his father, the man he had admired, with the man Agatha described. "That doesn't sound like him," Leo said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "My father wasn't the type to just disappear." Agatha let out a bitter laugh. "Is that what he told you, that he was a good man? He left me humiliated, ruined, and heartbroken. He moved on, started a family while I was left to pick up the pieces." Leo's stomach churned as Agatha's words sank in. "Why didn't you ever confront him?" Her gaze hardened, and she took a step closer, her presence as cold as the mansion itself. Oh, I did. But by then, it was too late. He was married, and your mother was pregnant with you. I realized I couldn't destroy the life he'd built, no matter how much I wanted to. The room seemed to shrink as Leo pieced together the puzzle. So, all this? He gestured around the grand library. The offer to marry you, the money, it's all about revenge, isn't it? Agatha didn't flinch. Revenge? No, Leo. This is justice. You may not know the sins of your father, but you'll come to understand them soon enough. Leo's world spun as he realized he was caught in a trap laid decades before he was even born. The days at the Whitmore estate passed slowly, each one layered with an oppressive weight that Leo couldn't shake. He couldn't ignore the gnawing suspicion that Agatha had more secrets buried within the mansion's grand halls. Every conversation with her carried an undercurrent of tension, her cryptic remarks leaving him more unsettled. One evening, after a particularly cold dinner in the cavernous dining room, Leo decided he needed answers. Agatha's words about his father haunted him, and he couldn't live with the ambiguity any longer. If she wouldn't tell him the truth, he'd have to find it himself. He waited until the house was silent, the faint ticking of an ornate grandfather clock the only sound echoing through the corridors. Armed with a flashlight he'd found in the kitchen, he began his search. The mansion was a labyrinth of locked doors and shadowed hallways. The air felt colder at night, as if the house itself held its breath, watching his every move. He crept through rooms filled with antique furniture and faded portraits, each one more ominous than the last. Finally, he reached a door he hadn't noticed before, hidden behind a heavy tapestry in the west wing. Unlike the others, this door was slightly ajar, its darkened frame inviting yet foreboding. Inside, he discovered what looked like a private study. The room was filled with papers, ledgers, and faded photographs, but it was a large, leather-bound journal on the desk that caught his attention. He opened it cautiously, his heart pounding as he flipped through the pages. The journal was filled with entries in Agatha's elegant handwriting, recounting her life with painful detail, her love for his father, her heartbreak, and her plans for retribution. As he read, one line sent a chill down his spine. The son must pay for the sins of the father. Leo's grip on the journal tightened. He realized that he was no longer just a pawn in Agatha's game. He was the target. Leo sat frozen in the dimly lit study, the weight of Agatha's words pressing down on him like a boulder. The journal lay open in his lap, the damning sentence staring back at him. The son must pay for the sins of the father. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of his father's life, Agatha's bitterness, and his own precarious position in this house of secrets. A soft creak outside the door jolted him from his thoughts. Leo quickly closed the journal and hid it back in its original spot on the desk. He extinguished his flashlight, plunging the room into darkness. The sound of footsteps grew louder, deliberate and unhurried, as if the person knew exactly where he was. The door swung open, and Agatha's silhouette filled the frame. She was holding a candle, its flickering light casting eerie shadows across her face. "Curiosity can be a dangerous thing, Leo," she said, her tone sharp but controlled. "I had to know," he replied, his voice steady despite the fear tightening his chest. "You've been dangling half-truths in front of me since the day we met. What are you really trying to do here? Is this marriage just a punishment for something I had no part in?" Agatha stepped into the room, setting the candle on the desk. Her icy demeanor cracked slightly, revealing a flicker of vulnerability. "You may not have wielded the knife, Leo, but you carry his name, his legacy. That's enough." "That's insane," Leo shot back. "I didn't ask for any of this. Whatever my father did to you, it has nothing to do with me." Her expression hardened again. "Perhaps not, but justice isn't always fair. You're here because you're the last piece of the puzzle I've been waiting to solve." Leo realized with chilling certainty that Agatha wasn't simply seeking closure. She was exacting a plan she had nurtured for decades. And he was right at the center of it. Determined not to be a passive participant in Agatha's twisted game, Leo decided he needed to dig deeper into the estate's mysteries. Agatha's cryptic explanations and veiled threats only fueled his resolve to uncover the full truth. He couldn't shake the feeling that the mansion itself held answers Agatha had no intention of revealing. The next morning, under the guise of exploring his new home, Leo ventured into parts of the estate he hadn't yet seen. The east wing caught his attention, a section of the house shrouded in an eerie silence. Dusty sheets covered the furniture, and cobwebs clung to the corners of the high ceilings. Unlike the rest of the mansion, which was immaculately maintained, this area seemed abandoned, forgotten by time. He pushed open a heavy wooden door at the end of the hall, revealing a small room bathed in dim light from a cracked window. The air was musty, carrying the scent of mildew and something faintly metallic. Inside, Leo discovered a collection of items that felt oddly personal: an old leather satchel, a stack of yellowed letters tied with twine, and a tarnished pocket watch engraved with initials he recognized. His father's initials. Leo's chest tightened as he sifted through the items. The letters were addressed to Agatha, filled with declarations of love and promises of a future together. But as he read further, the tone shifted. The last letter, dated just months before his father's marriage to his mother, was a terse farewell. Agatha, I can't be the man you need. Please understand this is for the best. The betrayal in those words leapt off the page, echoing the pain in Agatha's journal. Behind him, a floorboard creaked. He turned sharply to see Agatha standing in the doorway, her expression a storm of emotions. You shouldn't be here, she said, her voice a dangerous whisper. Leo held up the letters. You kept these all these years? Agatha stepped forward, her eyes glinting with something between anger and sorrow. Some things are impossible to let go of, Leo, but now you understand why you're here. Her words sent a chill through him, confirming his worst fears. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about rewriting a history that should have remained buried. Leo couldn't shake the weight of what he'd uncovered in the East Wing. His father's betrayal, Agatha's heartbreak, and the decades of bitterness that followed now felt like a storm poised to consume him. As the days wore on, Agatha's behavior grew colder, her remarks sharper, and the once awkward dinners turned into silent, tension-filled affairs. One evening, as the rain lashed against the mansion's tall windows, Leo decided he could no longer stay silent. He found Agatha in the grand sitting room, gazing into the crackling fire. The flickering flames cast shadows that danced across her face, making her appear both regal and foreboding. We need to talk, he said, stepping into the room. Agatha didn't turn to face him. What's there to talk about, Leo? You've already been snooping through the past. I didn't ask for this, he said, his voice rising. You dragged me into this house, into your life, under false pretenses, all for some twisted sense of justice? At that, Agatha turned, her eyes blazing with fury. False pretenses? You accepted my offer, didn't you? You agreed to marry me for money, for security. Don't act like you're some innocent victim here. Leo's jaw tightened. I thought it was just a business arrangement. I didn't know I was signing up to be a pawn in your vendetta. Agatha rose to her feet, her movements slow and deliberate. You think you're a victim, but you have no idea what it's like to be left broken, humiliated, and forgotten. Your father did that to me, and now you're here because of him. Maybe he was wrong, Leo said, his voice softer now, but destroying me won't fix what happened. Agatha's lips curled into a bitter smile. Oh, Leo, you're still so naive. This isn't about fixing anything. It's about making sure the scales are balanced. Leo's stomach churned as he realized just how far Agatha was willing to go. Her obsession wasn't about justice. It was about control, and she held all the cards. The mansion seemed alive that night, its creaks and groans amplified by the storm raging outside. Leo couldn't sleep, his mind consumed by the growing realization of how deeply Agatha's bitterness ran. Her words haunted him, but they also sparked a desperate need to uncover the truth, everything she wasn't telling him. He wandered through the dimly lit corridors, his footsteps muffled by thick rugs. There was one place he hadn't dared to explore yet, the locked room in the West Wing. Agatha had forbidden him from entering it during their first tour of the house, her tone making it clear that no explanation would be given. But tonight, curiosity won. Using a small tool set he'd found in the garage earlier, Leo worked at the lock. The sound of the storm outside masked the faint click as the mechanism gave way. Heart pounding, he pushed the door open. The room was dark and cold, its air stale as if it hadn't been disturbed in years. He switched on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness to reveal an unsettling sight. The room was a shrine, walls lined with framed photos of his father and Agatha in their younger days. Letters, mementos, and even dried flowers filled shelves, all carefully preserved. At the center of the room stood a glass case. Inside was a faded wedding dress, accompanied by a handwritten note, "For the life we were meant to have." Leo's breath caught in his throat. The shrine wasn't just a relic of Agatha's love, it was a monument to everything she'd lost and everything she blamed his father for. Behind him, the door creaked shut. He spun around, his flashlight illuminating Agatha's face. She stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "You weren't supposed to see this," she said, her voice a chilling whisper. "What is this, Agatha?" Leo asked, gesturing to the room. "Why keep all this?" Her gaze hardened. "Because some wounds never heal, Leo, and neither will yours." The gravity of her words sank in as the storm outside seemed to echo the turmoil within. Leo could feel his pulse pounding in his ears as he stood face to face with Agatha in the room that was equal parts shrine and mausoleum. Her presence filled the space like a storm cloud, suffocating and electric. "This isn't just grief," Leo said, his voice trembling but resolute. "This is obsession. You've been living in the shadow of a man who hurt you decades ago. You think this marriage changes that?" Agatha stepped closer, her heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor. "You think you understand, Leo? You're nothing but a child playing in a world you can't comprehend. Your father destroyed my life, and now I hold yours in the palm of my hand." Leo clenched his fists, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "What does that even mean? You keep talking in riddles. What do you really want from me, Agatha? Revenge? Closure? Or is it just control?" Her laugh was bitter, cutting through the tension like a blade. "I already have control, darling. You're in my house, living on my terms. Every move you make, every breath you take, it's all because I allow it." "But why?" Leo pressed, his voice rising. "If you hated him so much, why keep these?" He gestured to the photos, letters, and the wedding dress. "Why marry me? Why not just let it go?" Agatha's face twisted with a mix of anger and sorrow, because letting go would mean admitting he won, and I will never let that happen. Leo's mind raced as he tried to connect the dots. There was more to this than her vendetta against his father. The marriage, the cryptic messages, the locked room, it all felt like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't yet solve. Agatha leaned in close, her voice barely above a whisper. "You'll understand soon enough, but by then, it'll be too late." As she swept out of the room, her words hung in the air like a noose tightening around his neck. For the first time, Leo realized he wasn't just trapped in her house. He was trapped in her meticulously crafted web, and the more he struggled, the tighter it became. The mansion was eerily silent as Leo sat alone in the study, the storm outside having quieted to a steady drizzle. Agatha's words from the locked room replayed in his mind like a haunting melody he couldn't escape. She was playing a game, and he was her unwilling pawn. But Leo wasn't ready to concede defeat, not yet. Determined to uncover the full truth, he began searching through the study's drawers, cabinets, and shelves. Most contained the typical trappings of wealth, old contracts, ledgers, and deeds. But hidden at the back of a locked drawer, he found something far more sinister: a collection of letters. The correspondence was between Agatha and a private investigator she'd hired years ago. The letters detailed the investigation into his father's life, chronicling not only his past indiscretions, but also his connection to Leo's birth. One phrase stood out, sending chills down Leo's spine: "The son must pay for the sins of the father." It all became clear. Agatha didn't just marry him for companionship or closure. This was her ultimate act of revenge. She had orchestrated every moment of his misery since their union, and now she was preparing to deliver the final blow. Just as Leo absorbed the gravity of the letters, the study door creaked open. Agatha stood in the doorway, her face a mask of calm determination. "You've been busy," she said, her voice unnervingly soft. Leo rose, clutching the letters. "This ends now, Agatha. I won't let you destroy me because of his mistakes." Her expression didn't waver. "Destroy you? Oh, Leo, you misunderstand. I don't want to destroy you. I want you to feel what I felt, to live with the pain, the betrayal, and the loss, and you're only just beginning to understand." As she stepped closer, the room seemed to grow colder, the walls closing in. Leo realized he was no longer fighting for freedom, he was fighting for survival.